Beg pardon, my lady. I thought you'd retired for the night.
Sir Leicester has retired for the night. I am going out.
Call for the carriage, my lady?
Not necessary, Mercury. I simply want a breath of fresh air, that is all. So will you be so good as to unbolt the door?
Very good, my lady.
Mr. Tulkinghorn's clerk.
He was most insistent on seeing you in person, Sir Leicester.
For what reason?
He didn't give a reason, Sir Leicester, but said it was a matter of the utmost importance.
I will see him. Have things come to such a pass that Tulkinghorn now sends his clerk instead of attending upon us himself?
It would seem so.
Mr. Clam.
Well, Mr. Clam?
Sir Leicester, Lady Dedlock. My master is dead.
What? Tulkinghorn dead? Well, how? Was he taken ill?
I'm very sorry to say that he was murdered, sir. Shot through the heart in his office. Late last evening.
Shot? Tulkinghorn shot? In his own office? Tulkinghorn murdered? This is an outrage. Tulkinghorn murdered, then none of us is safe. Is there a policeman in charge of the investigation?
Yes, Mr. Bucket, sir.
Send Mr. Bucket to me. I intend to see to it that the ruffians who perpetrated this outrage against civilization suffer the full majesty of the law. Mr. Bucket, I want you to understand the importance of this inquiry.
Murder is always important, Sir Leicester Dedlock, Baronet.
Sir Leicester will do perfectly well, Bucket. Mr. Tulkinghorn, you must understand, was a very true and loyal servant of this family, as was his father before him. I wish to offer a reward of 100 guineas to anyone who can provide information leading to the conviction of the blackguard who perpetrated this vile deed. My wife, Lady Dedlock, has been greatly shaken by this.
Murder's a shaking thing, Sir Leicester Dedlock, Baronet. Not sure a reward will be necessary, though.
You mean you've identified the culprit already?
We have a suspect.
Well, then, for God's sake, arrest the man.
The thing is, we have to be sure we've got the right man. The evidence so far is only circumstantial. It may be him, it may not.
I suppose you have to consider every possibility.
Exactly, my lady.
But the man may escape, may leave the country.
Not this man, sir. He won't do that. Don't worry, sir. Don't worry, my lady. We've got our eye on him. Sir Leicester Dedlock, Baronet.
Seems very strange to see you in London, Mrs. Ranswell. What can I do for you?
If you please, milady, I don't know whether you have heard. My son is in prison, arrested for murder.
Your son? Arrested for murder?
Not the son you have met, milady, his brother, George, who left home very young to join the army. He is wrongly accused. I didn't know who else to turn to.
And who is your son supposed to have murdered?
Mr. Tulkinghorn.
I see. And what had your soldier son to do with Mr. Tulkinghorn?
There was a debt, but there was a dispute about it. And a boy died at my son's place. And George held Mr. Tulkinghorn to blame for it.
What boy?
A poor crossing sweeper boy that they called Joe. I don't know the ins and outs of it, but George was very angry with Mr. Tulkinghorn about it, and people knew that.
Forgive me, Mrs. Rouncewell, but it sounds as if the police had very good reason to arrest your son.
But But he's innocent, milady. I know him. He'd never do a thing like that.
Many a mother has said that before, Mrs. Ranswell.
Lady Dedlock, before I left Chesney Wold, I received a letter. I don't know who wrote it, and it made no sense to me at all, because when it came, I'd never heard of any murder. But now, I think perhaps you do know something, milady, and that you might be able to help my son.
Do you wish for me to read this?
Not in my presence, milady, please. And please believe I don't give it any credit. But if there is anything that you know, or anyone you suspect, I beg you to consider it. And think of my son. Thank you, milady.
Bucket? Bucket? I thought that disagreeable business was all done with.
Perhaps he has come to claim the reward, my dear.
Rather presumptuous. One would have thought that he would at least wait until the fellow was convicted and hanged.
Mr. Bucket.
Sir Lester Dedlock, Baronet. My Lady Dedlock.
Well, Mr. Bucket, how goes the world with you?
Tolerably well, sir. Tolerably well.
Was there something you wanted, Mr. Bucket?
Yes, sir, there was. A few questions I'd like to put to her ladyship.
The devil you would.
I have no objection. Let him ask his questions.
Perhaps your ladyship would be more comfortable if I put them to you in private.
No, whatever you have to say to me, you may say in front of my husband.
Very good, my lady. Won't take long. Did you go out on the night of the murder? Mr. Mercury tells me...
Yes. I did, I believe. I do sometimes feel the need to take the air before retiring.
Nothing wrong with that. Where did you go?
I really cannot recall, Mr. Bucket. The purpose of the walk was to take the air, not to go anywhere in particular.
Just so, of course. Can you recollect what you was wearing, my lady?
What an extraordinary question. No, I cannot.
Quite a chilly night, as I recall. Would you have had a black fringe shawl with you by any chance?
I do not believe I possess any such garment.
You see, the thing is, a lady, or shall we say a woman, was seen in the vicinity of Mr. Tulkinghorn's that night, wearing just such a shawl held over her face.
That is very interesting, Mr. Bucket, but as I say, I do not believe I possess any such thing.
Very good. With your permission, Sir Lester?
What is that woman doing here? Leave my house or I shall have you ejected. You have no business here.
Stay where you are. I say Mademoiselle Hortense has business here. Law business. And no one is above the law. Not even Sir Lester Dedlock, Baronet. Find it?
Yes,
Show it. Where'd you find it?
in my lady's closet.
You let that creature...
Steady, Sir Lester.
And Mercury was with me when I found it.
Give it here. Do you recognise this shawl, my lady?
Yes, I do recognize it now.
Very good. Memory can play funny tricks. Now, I wonder if you can remember any more about that night. Perhaps if I tell you that Sergeant George, the fellow we've got locked up, says he saw a woman with a black fringe shawl on the stairs leading up to Mr. Tulkinghorn's office.
This is not the only black fringe shawl in London, I believe. And as I say, I cannot remember wearing it.
Perhaps if I say this young lady says she followed you that night.
You see, now you must tell the truth.
Be quiet, mademoiselle, please. Lady Dedlock?
I did walk as far as Mr. Tulkinghorn's office that night. I had remembered something I wanted to say to him.
Very good. You were taking the air. You remembered you had something to say to Mr. Tulkinghorn. You thought you might as well pop up and have a word with him right away. Did you have that word with him, my lady?
No, I did not. I knocked on the door, but I received no reply. I came away.
Liar!
I believe I passed someone on the stairs.
That would have been Mr. George. And that clears up the last point that's been puzzling me. With your permission again, Sir Leicester? Now, Constable, you can arrest this lady for the murder of Mr. Tulkinghorn.
No! No, you fool!
Hortense Jaboulet.
Laisse-moi!
You are arrested
Cochon!
for the murder of Mr. Josiah Tulkinghorn of Lincoln's Inn Fields. Take her away.